The Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Savzu, the Rated R radio star, here for you for a little Patreon special. One that I had talked about would be coming out this past week on episode 226 of the Sovereign Tech Prime episodes, where I would talk about Google I/O 2017. Now, I talked about it really quite a bit in episode 226 of Sovereign Tech already, which, by the way, you know that little opening I do? Let's just stop for a second here. The little, Savzu, radar, radio, blah, 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 blah. Let me know if you ever get tired of that. It's my way of warming up. But I mean, if you're ever like, oh, Jesus, could he stop saying that? Or not Jesus, maybe say Satan. Then, just let me know. Anyway, so Google I/O 2017, it was last week. Of course, this is getting recorded on May 26th. 2017, so it's about a week ago, almost today, and it's that's really given time for a lot of the kind of the fallout of the announcements, people to actually sort of I don't know, just really assess what was talked about. And Google I/O is more than just one day. I mean, it seems like a lot of people are just there, okay, when is Sundar Pichai going to talk, and then and then for everybody else it's pretty much over once that's done. But it actually goes on for some time, and there's announcements that happen, for over a few days. And, I have to say, I mean, and it's also not that important, I think. Unlike there was that was at the 10-4 event in 2016, back in October. That's why it's called 10-4, because it was October 4th. Where on that event, there seemed to be at least some releases that came out of it. Like that day, you could buy some things that they talked about. Pretty much everything at Google I/O, which is a change from most, or at least from Google I/O's, say, 2015 and back, where, there wasn't anything like announced that was released, or necessarily, I didn't even hear anybody really brag about the giveaways. That used to be a reason that a lot of people wanted to go to a Google I/O event, is because they would do these like crazy hardware giveaways. Like in years past, I mean, not to say that these are good things, but in years past, you'd get a Nexus 7 or you'd get a Nexus Q. Remember that little failed piece of shit? Sorry. I hate Google. If you didn't know that already, I despise that fucking company. I wasn't always that way. I used to be a Google fanboy back when they were a company that I thought was actually really going to be changing the world, and that was really innovative, but they haven't been innovative in years. And also, I disagree with the kind of the path that they're on, and just a whole bunch of issues. Anyway, so the Google I/O this year in 2017 was a lot of announcements of things that largely, you couldn't do much with. I mean, like what they talked about with Google Photos, okay, that's out there. Google Lens is kind of out there. There's a beta for Android O, which we don't have a name for yet. That's kind of out there. And I could start with Android O, and I probably will, but just to talk on this, I mean, I don't know, if you're not actually gonna give us something serious. It's I don't know. It just seems kind of pointless to me. I don't get. There was a time where people were really excited about Google I/O. I don't think people get that excited anymore. I just don't. Same with WWDC, right, for Apple. I don't think people get that excited about WWDC anymore. There seems to be now there's these fall events that happen, which of course it makes sense. It's fall. You're getting ready for the holiday season for everybody to buy your shit and your kit. But yeah, it's a different world. I mean, Google's a different company than it was a few years ago. I mean, hell, Apple's a different company than it was a few years ago. It's a very, very different world, honestly, that we live in as far as in episode 200 of Sovereign Tech, I talked about this. I said, look, yeah, you got to pay attention to the history of these companies because there's a lot to glean from that, and it's the history of computing in general. But really, the companies that Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, like I said, was really, never really changed. They've been on path for what they're doing for a long time, and I've talked about that before any other tech journalist has. But kind of those big three, Google, Apple, Microsoft, they are just not at all. They are not the same company they were just 3 years ago, just 3 or 4 years ago. They are completely different companies, seemingly with completely different directions that they're going in, paths that they're taking. And, in some ways it's good, in other ways it's bad. And, there it is. It's just when you're thinking about Microsoft, just stop thinking about Bill Gates' Microsoft. Stop thinking about Steve Ballmer's Microsoft. It's not that company anymore. When you're thinking about Google, stop thinking about it as a search company. In fact, they admit that it's not a search company anymore. That was one of the things they kept bringing up during Google I/O 2017, is that this is an AI first company. Okay, so this is a company looking to, get everything into artificial, make everything artificial intelligence, blah, 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 which is probably why, and I guess we could start off with this as far as my review of Google I/O 2017, which is probably why Google Assistant was such a big deal at I/O 2017. It was, easily the highlight of everything that they were talking about, because everything really integrated into Assistant, be it Google Home, be it Android O, be it and I talked about this on the recent episode of Sovereign Tech, the incredible announcement that Google Assistant, was going to come to iOS, which originally Google Assistant was seemingly going to be it was supposed to be the selling point, I think. Either at first for the Pixel phones, it's like, no, you want a Pixel phone because that's the only way you're going to get this premium, Google product that is like the centerpiece of everything Google's doing, that being Assistant, which used to be Google Now or whatever the fuck, what was there, Now on Tap and all that stuff. I mean, they keep changing their names and canceling past products like there's no tomorrow. That is the part of history, or that is the part of Google that you can count on from the past 3 or 4 years, and maybe for a good chunk of their existence, is that you never ever count on any of their services. They will just go the way of the dodo before you know it. They might come back too, kind of like Google Voice, but largely that they'll disappear before you even blink. But anyway, so, like that, it seemed to be the selling point for the Pixel phones. Then it seemed to be more, the idea was that it was a selling point for using Allo, for using the Allo chat app, which is not doing very well at all. And then Google Assistant just became Google Assistant, probably because they knew, well, not enough people are buying Pixel phones, and not enough people are, downloading, installing, or at least using Allo. So, but Google Assistant is our path. This is our future. This is our AI first, push as a company. So we just got to make it available to everybody for everybody, and that's probably another reason why, Google Assistant is also now going to be rolling out desktop. Of course, that was the amazing thing, was that also, like, Allo with Assistant was supposed to be rolled out, like that was announced to get rolled out for desktop a long time ago, like months ago. And for it still not to be ready, and for them to just kind of make this little announcement, oh yeah, we're testing it out. It should be out, eventually. That was kind of weird, and I don't understand. What's the hard part about all this? Like why is it? You'd think it would just transfer over. I mean, with Chrome's with the amount of compatibility layers that Chrome can, just Google Chrome itself can run. Why does Assistant? Why is there any issue having Assistant operate on Google Chrome like it does in Android? That doesn't make any sense to me, unless they're talking about it being a completely standalone app that you don't even need Google Chrome for, which that's an interesting direction if that's the way they're going, but I haven't seen anything about that. Maybe if you know more about this than I do, feel free to correct me. But anyway, Google Assistant clearly is the centerpiece here. Like we said, that's what's going to be attached to Google Home, which there is a fair push for that. It is still going to be integrated probably into Android far more so than it could ever be into iOS. But let's be clear here, and I said this on Sovereign Tech this past week, Google Assistant being on iOS, I mean, Siri's just done. It's just cooked. Nobody... Really, like, I mean, there may be things that, what I've seen Siri used most for by iPhone users, that I hang with. They usually use it to transcribe something, with their voice. That's it. They generally do not ask it questions. They do not, I mean, like, or at least they're not trying to find out information with it. They'll use it to complete some kind of action or something. But I mean, if Google Assistant can do that, baked in with, I don't know, whatever other Google product or whatever you happen to be using, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how all that gets implemented, into it. I imagine Apple will put some pretty severe limitations on it, kind of like Cortana. Cortana on iOS, it's been out for iOS for a while, very limited in what it can do compared to what it can do on, the more open, not completely open, the more open system that Android is. So maybe Siri will still have a purpose, but I don't know. I think people are going to want. I mean, most even honestly, like most Mac users I know, they run Chrome, as their web browser, and if Assistant's built into Chrome, I mean, yeah, there's a good chance that's really going to take over, just because Apple's forays into the AI space so far has been very lackluster. In fact, they've provably taken multiple steps back. Like Siri has been significantly disempowered from what it used to be able to do. Like, I mean, this is just known. That there's a lot of things that Siri originally, when they bought Siri, because they didn't even develop it, they just bought it. And when they bought it out, like they scaled back a lot of what was being developed for Siri. So yeah, Google Assistant, I mean, that's a real deal. Now, to talk about this whole idea of being AI first, obviously Google has been, when you consider Google Glass and some other things, Google is very interested in getting rid of the UI getting rid of a physical UI of any kind. And they know they're in competition with Amazon because Amazon's taking the cake as far as that goes right now. They know Microsoft is heading in this direction as well because, as I've said on Sovereign Tech for some time now, at least for a couple of years, the real operating system for Microsoft is not Windows 10. The real operating system is Cortana. And Cortana, of course, exists within Azure. It's a server-based existence. But Cortana is where they really want you to rely on things because eventually, you can get rid of, the calendar. Eventually, you can get rid of all these different things, and Cortana will just tell it to you. Which, that's why I said this past week, really the only competition that Amazon has is Microsoft, because Microsoft has already long been going the same direction, just people don't realize it. That Microsoft has already had kind of an Echo. It's just, like an Amazon Echo, but it's Cortana on your desktop. And now Google's trying to play catch up with that with Assistant, obviously. Putting it on the desktop, making it available everywhere that they can, etc. So that's interesting. I mean, I don't know that when Google says that they're AI first, I mean, maybe they think that they're doing this. I don't know. But when they say AI, I mean, it's a fucking buzzword. Okay. I don't think they're actually like creating anything remotely like Skynet. And I don't necessarily even just mean malicious. I just don't think that they're really creating like a genuine artificial intelligence of some kind. This isn't the movie Her, as much as everybody, wants to hear that. I mean, I love the statement that some people with the degree of actual intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, say like, yeah, if you walk around at Alphabet, Alphabet/Google, and you ask people, it's like, oh, are you working on the AI that's, going to bring on the singularity and all this stuff? Like every developer in every fucking room you go to, even at Google X, will say, I don't know, maybe the guy next door is working on that, but I'm not. But that's what all of them say. Nobody's working on that. So when they say AI first, I mean, really, it's just a bullshit marketing term. They're not really developing, what like say, Nick Bostrom or some of these other guys would consider to be AI. We're not heading towards Blade Runner as much as maybe they want to sell you on that entire notion. So anyway, yeah. So why don't we get into Android O because that's really where I wanted to start this, but we opened up with Assistant a bit there. So Android O, the only really interesting thing to talk about here with Android O, in my opinion, is, and I think I might have talked about this on Sovereign Tech a little bit, but the big deal is how they're going to section off like a lot of the security, shall we say, hard points of the operating system of Android, where you'll be able to update those. Google themselves will be able to update those, and these aspects, these different what's the term? Because they're not sandboxes, but these the security corners, a lot of the areas they handle security, etc. within Android, within the software, those are going to be able to get updated. Again, by Google themselves, and as to where in the past, you had to rely on the manufacturer, like say Samsung or Kyocera or whoever, to do the updating. And sometimes, well, Samsung has a good track record, but some of these other companies do not have great track records of updating that shit. Or you had to even wait on the telco. Maybe the telco wanted to make sure that what the manufacturer wanted to push out to you, met their standards or lack thereof, more likely lack thereof. So for Google to have, a more granular control of the security on Android, without having to rely upon the manufacturers or the telcos to actually push out the updates, that is only good, in my opinion. I think that's a fantastic thing. Okay. This is much like how, how Microsoft is doing Windows as a service, where, they are really, really pushing hard on the updates kind of going through them and them being able to, get it out there and handle things quick. And which allows for, keeping things like, say, WannaCry, which we talked about in episode 226 of Sovereign Tech, to keep the WannaCry ransomware from being a thing. If, people were on board with what Microsoft was putting out there, it wouldn't have been an issue. And Google knows that this is, equally a problem with Android, which, they announced at I/O 2017 that Android is now, on 2 billion active Android devices. Or, there are 2 billion active Android devices. I mean, that's crazy. So yeah, you got to secure that shit. And so this is the right move. That's the main thing really to talk about with Android O. A lot of the other features seem to be features that from what I was reading, looked like features that the Android N was supposed to have, and some of them are little, kind of like the nightlight feature and some other stuff. We're just, a lot of the features promised are going to get improved in Android O. Now, in some ways, Android, other than that, really that control by Google of, the secure sectors of Android itself. Other than that, I didn't really see a whole lot that got me excited. I mean, there's new emoji, there's an emoji revamp, woohoo, it's all this bullshit. Like I've said before, the entire reason that there are new versions of Android every year is to make investor meetings, look good. That's it. That's all it's about. It's like, oh yeah, we're developing new things, and investors just see a new fucking letter, and it's amazing. You'd think, like me, I'm nobody, okay? And I can realize this, and so many tech journalists can realize this, but investors somehow still buy into it. Like, I mean, these people are so fucking dumb, And if you happen to be a Google investor and you're listening to me, my apologies, because obviously you're a cut above if you're listening to Sovereign Tech. But for fuck's sake, how do you not see this? That the entire Android versioning thing is just raw stupidity. And you could say, well, maybe it's because it ends up getting passed down to the consumers. I don't think the consumers care, because if the consumers cared that much, and if they knew that much about Android versions and all this stuff, like, they would be, you could just look at the sales figures. They would be buying vastly different devices, than what they do. Everybody would be buying a Samsung Galaxy, which they don't. Everybody would be buying a Nexus phone, which they don't. Everybody would be buying a Pixel phone, which they don't. So it doesn't make any fucking sense. It's mind-boggling. There is so much dumb money in Silicon Valley, and I mean dumb fucking money. It's no wonder nothing moves forward, because these investors and VCs, not all, but so many, are just fucking muprons. Oh, anyway. So there's not, I don't feel like there's a whole lot to talk about with Android O, that's really doing anything crazy. Google Photos and Google Lens, I talked about those in episode 226 of Sovereign Tech. I don't really feel a need to rehash that here. Bottom line is that, well, this is what happens when you give Google all of your photos and, hand over all of your privacy, is, they create tools that, oh, wow, that's so nice. The Google Lens can look at a flower and it can identify the flower. What do you think the NSA, CIA, FBI, AT&T, and all the other government organizations would do with that kind of technology? Just ask yourself that question. Anytime you see a new technology, anytime you see a new app, new software, something like that, here's a great outlook to have. Okay? Ask yourself, how could the government use that? And every time, you ask that question, that's how I gauge everything that I talk about on Sovereign Tech, is I ask the question, as soon as I hear about something new, I ask the question, How could the government use that? And that's where my train of thought comes from, that you listen to every week. Okay? There you go. You can put those sunglasses on like they live, all right? And how could the government use that? And suddenly you're going to go, holy fucking shit, what is Silicon Valley doing? And we know that the government's involved. I mean, fucking DHS, they put a huge satellite office right in the heart of Silicon Valley. Like, you think the government, they're not all playing ball with the government? You're fucking crazy. Except for maybe Mike, but then Microsoft's not technically in Silicon Valley, right? They're way, they're up north. And I'm not saying Microsoft doesn't play ball with the government. Of course they do. But you know what I mean? They seem to have a little bit of standards. We were talking about that this week. But anyway, so other than, Android O, again, not a whole lot to really talk about there. Again, it's just a fruition of a lot of different things that have really been talked about at Google I/O for a couple of years, like the instant apps. Progressive web apps were something that was talked about, which progressive web apps I think are a fairly cool idea. In fact, it might be something I get into in this week's episode of Sovereign Tech coming up, episode 227, where with progressive web apps, the idea is that it's literally just a website that you put a shortcut to on your home screen. And the website has the bulk of the functionality, thanks to HTML5 and JavaScript, whatever, the bulk of the functionality to work like an app does, but you don't have to install an app. Now, this is only a good thing for a bunch of reasons, because there's the Cloak and Dagger malware out there, which the Cloak and Dagger malware, I probably will talk about this more on Sovereign Tech, is where like these overlays are coming over on apps that are making you press buttons that you don't, that do a different function than what you think. And it's installing various malware and other things onto, again, these 2 billion active Android devices. Google's, one of the things that Google announced at I/O was they have their new, what was it called? Play Protect, where it's supposed to be this, malware scanning system built into the Play Store. They've had it before. They just finally gave it a name and talked about it more because it's such an important thing right now. Even Play Protect is having a hard time detecting, a lot of this shit. So my point being is that the less apps you install, the less chance that something like Cloak and Dagger, occurs because you're not installing all these bullshit apps. So progressive web apps, I think, are, a fine and dandy thing. There can be a problem with that because it's all being done through the browser, which becomes a single point of failure. But I think it's mitigating a degree of risk. So, that was mentioned. And of course, they did talk about Twitter, because Twitter's really probably, and all you got to do is go, I talked about this on Sovereign Tech a couple of weeks ago. Just go to mobile.twitter.com. It's probably the best implementation we've seen of PWA, not UWP, that's a Windows thing, but PWA, Progressive Web Apps, which will be a thing not just on Android. I mean, this is going to be a thing on, on iOS as well. So a lot of other things discussed. Let's move on. At Google I/O 2017, a lot of it just seemed to be like just software redesigns, UI redesigns. Nothing drastically, nothing major. That was a big part of it. So we talked about Assistant. What was going to be happening there. Some of the features that they talked about with Assistant, have already started to roll out. This was a no-brainer. The fact that you don't have to talk to Assistant anymore, now you can actually type to Assistant what you want it to say. Before, literally, you had to talk to it to interact with it. Why that wasn't a feature on day one, I don't know. And I haven't really messed with Assistant much, so I didn't even notice that. Like Cortana, you can do that, because I do mess with Cortana here and there. But that's mind-boggling that was like a feature. Woo! It just speaks to just how bad I think I/O 2017 was, because there was nothing. The big excitement for me, and this is something else that I talked about, on episode 226 of Sovereign Tech, was really the the standalone Daydream headset, virtual reality headset, AR and VR. It's supposed to be able to do both. So, the enhancements with Daydream, that's Google's new, more serious virtual reality platform. They talked about Daydream 2.0 and all this, and how there's going to be a Chromium VR or, Chrome VR, but it's going to be within the Chromium code as well. So, you're going to have, virtual reality is a push. Now, that's good. That's the one thing where Google was like, okay, yeah, we're really looking at the future now, and we're not bullshitting you. It's like that. That's the one aspect, because with Assistant, you're kind of, and talking about AI first and all that, they're really kind of bullshitting people. There's a lot of marketing tactics in there. As to where with Daydream, not at all. Now, I think the more interesting point to bring up about Daydream, okay, yeah, I'm super excited about a standalone headset that doesn't require a phone. There's a lot of brilliance behind that, for a bunch of reasons, okay? But I think the interesting thing that wasn't talked about was Magic Leap at all. Like, that should be seen as creepy, because you're doing this big VR push and not a hint of anything about Magic Leap. Especially when, you have Microsoft, which right now I think Google is really, they have to play catch up with Microsoft in a lot of ways, because Microsoft is the only competition for Amazon. Okay, and Amazon, and Google knows that Amazon is the big tech company right now that's making all the change, doing all the innovating, making all the big moves. Okay, so they got to catch up to Microsoft, then they can go after Amazon. And Microsoft is going huge on AR and VR. In fact, honestly, most of the Daydream VR development that's going to happen, with Google's own platform, is probably going to happen more so now with, on Windows 10. Because Windows 10, with the Creators Update and the Creative Update that's coming out soon, you have so many features put into it, Paint 3D, all these different, modeling UWPs and whatever, that are designed to create mixed reality content. Okay, so a lot of people, they're going to be putting the Android development platform onto a Windows 10 machine, because they can probably, integrate and export so easily from Windows 10. So, Google's got to take this pretty seriously, and they really should have if they wanted to take it seriously, because Microsoft has made such huge announcements as far as mixed reality, hardware, not just software, but hardware as well. Those very inexpensive headsets and all this different stuff that's going to be coming out, towards the end of 2017 here. They should have announced more. They really should have, or they should have released a fucking product. Like, that's the other problem. They're not ahead of the curve. In fact, that standalone headset, I think they were saying something that it might not be out till Q1 of 2018. Oh, you're behind the fucking ball. When Microsoft's going to eat your lunch. It's so bad. Oh, wow. This is the thing. And I said this when I did the review for the 10.4 event from Google. With Google's events lately, the more important thing to listen to is what's not said. To pay attention to, I guess I should say, is what's not said. And the fact that there was no mention of Magic Leap, really. Like, that should have been red flags all over the place, saying that what I've already told you over the past couple of years on Sovereign Tech, which is that Magic Leap is a bullshit technology. It's not real. I don't know what the hell Google bought into. The whole thing could have been a scheme. Very, very strange. But I think it odd that it wasn't mentioned at all. So, Google certainly does have some technologies that are very interesting for virtual reality. I'm not saying everything is dire. I think that they are, this is the right direction for them, is with Daydream 2.0, with Chrome VR, and with a standalone headset. They own Project Tango. They have a ton of technologies that do pretty impressive stuff, within a room that you don't require the sensors, kind of like the HTC Vive or something like that. They've got a lot of good shit that going for them, that I think they're going to go forward with. Like I said, it's just they've said some stuff in the past that they really didn't do enough with, and it's a failure on their part, in my opinion, that they didn't have this Daydream headset ready to go for sale at I/O 2017. That was a missed opportunity, in my opinion, because, these $300, and who knows what this thing's going to cost. Nobody has any idea, what it's going to cost, or really any of its specs or anything like that. And they're just calling it standalone, which I actually think is a great, I think calling the Daydream standalone device, calling it standalone or standalone VR, I think is a fantastic name, because it's kind of subconsciously saying this is all you need. Just like the brilliance of Nintendo calling their console the Nintendo Switch, because you're going to change to Nintendo once you get your hands on this baby, once you start playing Breath of the Wild or something, right? So, marketing's a big deal, and I think calling it standalone, maybe they won't stick with that name, but I would. I think that's a little piece of brilliance right there that a lot of people are kind of missing on. There's a lot of other stuff that they were talking about, a lot of different technologies where, Google Maps will be able to like map stores and all this different shit. None of that stuff's going to take off that they talked about at Google I/O. Like beacons and all these different things, so much of that stuff, it's not going to take off because the stores have to, like, you have to understand this. To do like the kind of mapping within a store to where it helps you like find something within the store, you do realize, I mean, I hope if you're somebody that actually goes to a grocery store now and again, how often do the shelves change? How often, okay, well, let's put the cottage cheese, at this end of the freezer as compared to this one. And what, you're just going to, people are just going to scan barcodes to shift all that shit around and have it upload to Google? No, it's going to be a nightmare. Okay. Inventorying is a nightmare enough if you've ever worked in any job remotely like that. This shit's just not going to work. Because that's the key for a lot of these technologies that you see get shown off. Okay, that are supposed to change the shopping experience and all this stuff, right? A lot of that stuff doesn't work very well because most stores, like you get one or two big companies, like you'll get a Macy's or something like that will work as a reference store, but they're the only ones that'll ever use it because, you have to pay this crazy amount for somebody, to even handle, like mapping the store or setting everything up. And most stores, most companies, whatever, aren't going to do that. They're just not. So that's all kind of bullshit. Now, this is the reason that, in my opinion, why Amazon has been opening their own stores is because they are looking. Was it Amazon Go? Was that what it was called? Where it's a store you just walk in and you walk out. You don't ever pull out like payment information or anything like this. You just fill up your cart and away you go. Because it all gets done pretty seamlessly. The reason Amazon, in my opinion, that they're getting into building their own stores, not just into the retail space. Okay, they're already doing that by selling off their old Kindles and everything to be point-of-sale systems, right? That was the very first thing, like 3-4 years ago, that I said, okay, I get it now. I get what Amazon's doing. They're gonna take over the world because they just entered brick and mortar. Now they've really entered brick and mortar by creating their own stores, and I think they're doing that every store that they do, whether it's Amazon Go or if it's just one of their fucking bookstores. It's a pilot program. Okay, to where they know that you're not going to be able to get Macy's, Target, Walmart, whoever else to get on board with your new shopping technologies that all, inhabit the cloud and make everything seamless and contactless and all this shit, right? They know that, so they made their own stores that can do that. And eventually those stores, may get very popular. We'll see how that goes. So all that shit about, anything Google talks about as far as improving the shopping experience or like the improvements on Google Maps, as far as like working with businesses are horse shit. They're pure horse shit with what they were talking about. None of that's going to take off. Apple's tried doing the same thing, never takes off. Android Pay, yep, there's some improvements there. That seems to be something that's working. Just like Apple Pay seems to be taking off to some degree. I've used Android Pay and yeah, it's pretty slick. Like, I'm not saying use it. I'm not saying trust it. I'm just saying it's pretty slick, for what it is. So I'm not shocked that sort of thing changed. But then that's just all that is like, giving people like new card readers or something, that everybody was updating to, in the past year, at least in the United States anyway, to comply with chip and pin credit cards. So of course that makes sense. You don't have to hire new people for Apple Pay or for Android Pay to be a thing. You don't really have to do, all you have to do is a new install that everybody was already doing anyway, at the point of sale. So yeah, so whatever. Great. They talked about stuff they added to Apple Pay. How nice, and like they've integrated PayPal with not Apple Pay, with Android Pay. Great. Okay, nice. There you go. Boom. Yeah, that kind of about covers it. That's the thing. There wasn't a whole lot going on, in my opinion, with this. A lot of it was kind of developer stuff, sort of behind the scenes, and I can respect and appreciate that. But that's nothing that really the consumer, in general, is going to interact with or see. At least not readily, not until somebody actually takes advantage of whatever technology that happens to be. The best thing that, in my opinion, that Google has going for them, Google Assistant, yeah, they've, I think that's good. That's going to take off. Mainly it's going to hurt iOS. I think that's kind of the big news with Assistant is that it's really just going to hurt iOS. Assistant is not going to deliver on the dreams I think that maybe a lot of people have for it. They have these AI dreams, which they're just that. They're just dreams. They're never going to be, or at least in my opinion, I shouldn't say never, but I don't think they're ever going to be a reality. You're not going to end up with her, or at least you're not going to end up where these things are going to approach some degree of sentience. Not from Google anyway. Okay, which is what it appears like they're kind of going for. And that's just that marketing, kind of on their part. So VR is the right direction for them. I think they have a real play there. It's not going to unseat any other companies like that play because, like I said, where is most of this content going to get developed? This VR content, it's probably going to get fucking developed on Windows 10. So you're not knocking down Microsoft at all. I told people about, and this was something that there wasn't a whole lot of talk about either. Were Chromebooks. There's some real issues here. Okay, I think Chromebooks are in a degree of trouble for a few reasons. They're doing great in education markets, but they're not doing great. Once you're out of grade school. What the fuck? That's not going to, that's not enough for any job. And I talked about this, that I heard a conversation from a Google insider that I wasn't supposed to hear, in real life. Apparently the company doesn't have any faith in the Chromebook, ecosystem. And well, what do you say to that? Another thing, this is an interesting thing that I didn't mention on episode 226 of Sovereign Tech was that people, apparently some bigwigs at Google were asked about Fuchsia, which is the operating system they're developed, which is on GitHub. It's a real-time operating system. We talked about it when it was first announced, not announced, but first found out about, I should say. It was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And I talked about the advantages of real-time operating systems, the disadvantages, whatever. But someone was asked about Fuchsia at I/O 2017, and they said, we're not going to talk about it. So something's going on there. And probably, this might, people have all kinds of wild theories as to what exactly Fuchsia is supposed to be. Is Fuchsia, the operating system, is this just going to be like Windows 10 embedded, where it gets put into all these IoT devices? Is it supposed to be the replacement for Android and Chrome OS? What is Fuchsia? It might be all of those. It might be admittedly, one of the security issues that Android is having is that it's based on, it's based on Linux, which, Linux is far more secure than most other operating systems. But when you add in a lot of the layers and just the average stuff that people kind of do with, quote unquote, with their computers or with their handheld devices or whatever, it kind of loses its security just because it's a hot target. And so for Google to come up with its own new kernel, which Fuchsia is this is a new operating system from the ground up. Most times when you hear, there was like a decade in the aughts, or, from like 2005, I don't know, maybe 2003 to 2013, something like that, where a lot of companies were talking about, like HP was talking about they were going to come out with their own OS, and all these other people talking about how they were going to come out with their own OS. They were just coming out with a different distribution of Linux. That's all they were doing. They weren't really coming up with their own OS. Not to knock different distributions of Linux. I think it's great that kind of ecosystem exists. But Google is literally making a totally new operating system. Apple hasn't even necessarily really done that. iOS, you could kind of, Mac OS is based off of BSD. So this is totally new shit. And maybe they see that as their gateway to more secure devices, which is something that's got to be solved. It's got to be worked on. So it's interesting that wasn't talked about either. Again, that's another case with Fuchsia where what they wouldn't say is the more interesting thing. The fact that they wouldn't talk about Magic Leap. Now, they wouldn't talk about Fuchsia. Look, we know Fuchsia is a real thing. It's fucking on GitHub, okay? It's open source. There's no debate about what exactly Fuchsia makes up. As to where Magic Leap, no, nobody knows what the fuck it is. And you can't trust fucking Kevin... Shit, his name's escaping me. The guy from Wired. Love the guy. I actually really respect the guy. But I mean, you know, obviously you can't trust that. You can't trust that. Kevin Kelly. There it is. I was thinking Kevin Kiner, but that's the composer who works on so much Star Wars and Wing Commander and all that. Yeah, Kevin Kelly, I mean, I wouldn't trust him, what he had to say. And I think he has an odd outlook on the future, too, anyway. But this isn't about Kevin Kelly. So, there you go. I really can't think of much else to say on Google I/O 2017. This is just a bonus episode. I think, you know, kind of the big stuff, talking about photos and Lens, which are the things, the real kind of takeaways. And, of course, Assistant and Daydream VR standalone. You know, I talked about all those pretty briefly. Or, you know, I talked about them enough on episode 226 of Sovereign Tech. So, anyway, that's it for this little episode. Got some other little nuggets coming out over the next few days, most likely. And, you know, I love to just overload you with content on Patreon. I want to make sure you're getting your money's worth. And a lot of people say that, oh, yeah, you know, that's not a problem. You're giving us way more content than we ever expected, blah, 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 and great, you know, and don't feel like you have to listen to everything. But if you're ever alone, hey, there's probably some new Patreon content for you to consume. So anyway, I will bring up quickly that because this is Friday and actually a movie that I was initially excited about, which was the new Baywatch, kind of the remake of Baywatch. I was going to see it tonight, but from some people that I trust their taste anyway. They all said that the movie was just atrocious. Like, it was just a terrible fucking movie. And so I'm not going to give this any money. I mean, that's kind of the real solution, right? For all of these remakes, it's the solution in any aspect of the market. Don't give it money, and then it won't happen, right? So, you know, with Baywatch, I'm not going to give it money. That way, I hope there is not a sequel, you know, and I can just go back to, like, I'm a huge Baywatch fan. Okay, I mean, I got my little Funkos of, you know, Mitch Buchanan, you know, David Hasselhoff's character, the whole thing, you know, my little Funko Pops. I mean, I fucking love, you know, the original Baywatch. And most people don't know, like, they don't remember that this was the #1 show in the world for a long time. I mean, it was a big deal. Game of Thrones has nothing on the popularity that Baywatch was appreciating in the 90s. Nothing. I mean, it doesn't even come fucking close to how popular Baywatch was. You could go anywhere in the world, and at the time, I kind of did. Okay, you could go to anywhere in the world. People fucking knew what you were talking about when it came to Baywatch. And they could name names. They could talk about Pam Anderson. They could talk about, you know, David Hasselhoff, you know, Yasmin Bleeth. I mean, you go down the list of people that they could talk about. They knew the deal. You know, I mean, and they knew the music, the whole thing. I mean, you go around and you talk to people about Game of Thrones, they can't name the fucking actors' names. They can't name half the shit you're talking about. They don't know what you're talking about. Guaranteed. I mean, Baywatch is huge, and even Baywatch Nights, they had a couple seasons where it was that kind of like detective show, got a little supernatural at points. That was kind of fun too. But anyway, so I'm a huge Baywatch fan. I mean that with absolute sincerity. Have been, you know, as far back as I can remember, you know, as far back as the show's existed. And it was, you know, I started watching it because I was like, well, fuck, you know, like, I get to see more David Hasselhoff. And, you know, and that equated to Knight Rider for me, and that's why I started watching it. Then I started enjoying the show. In fact, you know, I just thought of it. Tur Demeester. I had him on the show. What was that? A few months back, I had Tur on the show, who, you know, he's a, you know, big crypto guy and everything. And we talked about it at the end of the show. We talked about Baywatch, how it was just like, it was the biggest shit in the world. Like, everybody was on board with this stuff. And that was fun to talk about that. So, anyway, I won't be catching the remake at all. Maybe down the line somewhere I would catch it, but I'm certainly not going to throw any money at it because there doesn't need to be more. I'll just fucking, you know, I have every season of the show, and I have Baywatch Nights. I'll just watch it on my lonesome, you know. And anyway, so that's it. All right, Google I/O 2017. There's the wrap up, and you got a little Baywatch at the end. Just letting you know, I won't be doing a review of it. I think some people were expecting it. I was actually planning on it, but I'd heard it was just so bad, I'm not going to bother. So, all right, there it is. New Sovereign Tech will be out tomorrow. Yes, it will have the new intros. It's going to be a great time. I'm sure you'll love it, and I have a lot of great topics to talk about. Definitely MP3, all kinds of fun shit. So, I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.